the failures of modern Black leadership. Because you're speaking about Kamala Harris as the first Black vice president. You have Barack Obama, the first Black president. You have Lloyd Austin, the first Black Secretary of Defense. And the people who in the Black community who tend to get power that represent the Democratic Party, they tend to be the biggest sellouts. Now that compare that to our radical era of MLK and Malcolm X and Fred Hampton, and I'm glad to see people like you and Mark Kimberly, our elders, lead the way with Black Alliance for Peace. So for people who are not familiar, can you describe what the goal of Black Alliance for Peace and why your work is so important?
Well, thank you so much for those kind words. We launched Black Alliance of Peace in April of 2017, right after the end of the Obama period and the beginning of the Trump era. And we thought that this was the most propitious time to launch this organization, because we thought that this was an opportunity to sort of reclaim the sanity of our folks. 'Cause we know that Black folks went absolutely insane during those 8 years of Obama.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you about
Um, there was no rational discourse. In fact, as some of you may know, it was the uh, uh, bar that was one of the first publications that opposed openly the Obama administration. I say oppose, raised critical questions about the Obama administration. And when we were doing that, in fact, with the first couple of years, I wasn't part of that because I was running another organization called the U.S. Human Rights Network, which was the first human rights network explicitly targeting human rights abuses within the United States. Once I left that formation, I quickly joined BAR. And it's important to note for folks who may not know that when you criticize Barack Obama in those days,
that.
you were taking a risk. Everybody can do it now, but in those days, people were you could get physically assaulted. And then that never happened to me, but you had to be prepared for that because people were absolutely crazy when it came to this man. But so we launched in 2017. The objective was to try to reclaim the what we call the traditional Black radical peace tradition, the Black radical tradition, um, to revive Black internationalism with a politics informed by the principles of anti-imperialism and anti-capitalism. So to help to revive the Black radical movement, we call it the Black Alliance for Peace, and because we anybody we understand that peace is what we want. We'd like to have peace and prosperity for everybody, but we also understood too that if you want peace, you have to fight for it. You have to fight against those elements that are responsible for the violence, the state violence, the endemic violence of the system, in order for us to have peace and development. So we thought that the Black Alliance of Peace was also a label that can get us into Reverend Chicken Wings church, so we get access to the people, because that's what it's all about. It's about organizing the masses of our people, and so this is what we are attempting to do. We started off with about 6 of us when we launched. Today we have BAP citywide alliances in most of the major cities. We have something like 700 individual members, 58 national organizations. We have over
Nice.
500 members of the U.S. Out of Africa network. We have various communication instruments that we are part of and support, including Black Power Media, Voices with Vision, um, Lukeman Nation, Hood Communists. These are all connected to this
Yeah.
formation with individual members. So we're trying to build a structure that will allow us to build power with our people, a Black radical structure, and that's what we've been doing for the last now 6 years as of April 4th.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I've been a big supporter of Black Alliance for Peace. I love the statements that you guys put out during very critical events. You guys recently condemned the Biden State Department for going after black socialists, and we're going to discuss that here very soon. But to go back to your comments regarding, I love how you said the black community lost their damn minds because during the Obama administration, because that's probably the best way to put it. There was like this mass formation psychosis on a scale that people don't even realize back then. Like I
Yeah.
remember people that didn't follow politics. Like when I first came out, I was like, "Fuck Obama," and I remember when I didn't like Obama for quite some time before I came out. Like it's like almost like LGBTQ issue. Like
Right.
I came
You
out
came
as
out.
being anti-Obama. I hated that motherfucker for a while. Now I
Right.
finally start saying stuff publicly because I knew the backlash. And I had people who was far from liberal. Trust me, guys, far from establishment liberals. That they heard my position on Obama. They was like, "What? What are you talking about? What?" And I was lucky. I tell you guys all the time, I'm lucky because I have more of an apolitical family and community structure around me. So it was more like they couldn't believe it. Like, what? I can't believe what? What? But there's other people who they would straight cut you off. Like they hear you talking shit about Obama. I remember the Michael Eric Dyson, Dr. Cornel West debates were very public and black
Hmm.
entertainment for Obama. It was such a crazy time. So it's good to have people like Black Alliance of Peace. I talked to Margaret Kimberly about this as well. She was leaning away, calling it out. It was a very hard time to do so, and you guys took your neck out when it was extremely dangerous.
And
And
Nick,
go ahead,
let me interject here because I actually had Margaret Kimberly on my show. She was one of my first guests, and this was the topic. It was Obama in the Obama years, and what we discussed. I'm curious to hear what all of your opinions is. We discussed that this sort of psychosis, how you describe it, is like it was all of the fantasy we had been sold about, sort of the Huxtables,
yeah,
manifested into who the Obamas are. So it was like a manifestation of hope that we finally saw, that we were sold this package, this dream, this American dream, and we're looking at it not like sort of with blinders on, like not seeing the bombings, not seeing what's happening in Libya, just oh, the Huxtables have finally made it. But what are your thoughts on sort of that outlook on why we had this sort of psychosis, Ajamu?
It was definitely a cultural and an ideological phenomenon. I would argue that it was the culmination of what Pascal Roberts refers to as the
Mm-hmm.
50-year counter-revolution. People have to understand that, and we're all part of the Black liberation movement, that the beyond the low intensity warfare that was directed at us, there was also an ideological component, a cultural component that really was intensified in the 1970s as part of the counterinsurgency strategy of the state. And what was the objective? The objective was to ensure that there would not be the reproduction of another generation that took to the streets, that organized, that engaged the enemy and actual military confrontations, that disrupted the system, that brought us to the edge of a revolutionary era. And how do you do that? You attempt to transform the consciousness of the oppressed. The objective was the what I call the Americanization of the Negro, if you will, to turn us from Africans into quote unquote Americans.
yes,
And that ideological component was part and has been part of their campaign of containment, and they have been fairly successful in that. I mean, look, how is to explain the commitment that they had? I don't want to get into this too many details in terms of the integration process and the busing and all of that. And who were they busing? They're busing our young people. That basically this was part of the strategy to transform our consciousness, and the culmination of that process, if you will, was with the Obama candidacy and him coming to I say power, but him coming into office in 2009. That this was the culmination of that process, and people were. So what we saw was the reflection of the conservative politics that have become
Yeah.
ascendant in our community. And there was no disconnection between ourselves and the American state. That's why people will stand up and be just as patriotic as anybody else at the basketball games, as
Uh,
football games, and refer to the system and to the state as we and us. And today you see that, black folks are just as mad at the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians as other folks. And I tell
Jesus
people,
Christ.
when you take your black ass in your car, and when you look in the rearview mirror and see those blue lights, I bet you $1 to a donut that when those pigs get out their car, they're gonna be Chinese, Russian, Iranians,
Yeah.
Venezuelans. They're gonna be good old Americans, quote unquote Americans, and probably even black Americans, ready to
Hmm.
take your life at a traffic stop. So look, the enemy is clear. They understand their interests. Our problem, our challenge is trying to recoup that spirit of rebellion and resistance, that vision that we don't have to be captives. We have the ability to be self-determined. That's
Yeah.
part of the mission that we have in the Black Alliance for Peace.
We could literally do an hour live stream on this alone. This is
Alone.
something that this is a topic that I've been deeply interested in. I wrote about it in my first article, and I wish I could articulate it as beautifully as you did. Uh, the Americanization of the Negro.
Yeah, I
I
love
have
that.
witnessed this, and this is a theory that I've been bouncing around in my head. Like in hindsight, like once I became more class conscious, the coordinated effort to turn Black Americans to obedient consumers. There's people that care about consumerism, materialism. They try their best to rip the community apart. That's why
Mhm.
this. I like that. This could be an individual live stream because we can put out like there's a coordinated effort to separate the community, to separate radicalism from our culture, and then there's this worship of celebrities who are also black capitalist sellouts, and then those same black capitalist sellouts like LeBron James will go out and promote war criminals like Barack Obama and manufacture consent for the worst people in our community. There will be representatives of banks who charge the black community higher interest rates. Like, once again,
Mhm.
I'm gonna cut the conversation off here because we could do 1 hour on this topic alone, because it's such a great point. And so many people still have their mind colonized. That's why I say people to decolonize their mind, because for ever since the end of the civil
Mhm.
rights movement, there's been a nonstop coordinated effort to colonize the minds of Black Americans, including the Black Americans that we see in Congress.